everybody, my name is Mr. Francy and welcome back to Mr. Francy Reads. Okay, so today we're going to be doing my monthly wrap, talking all the books that I read in the month of February. So in the month of February, I read 10 books, but before we get into discussing all of them, quick shout out to this book, Mistborn: The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I picked up this book about halfway through the month and didn't know if I would have it finished by the time I was doing my monthly wrap or not. I have not finished it yet, so I'm just going to push this over onto my February TBR, and after that I'm going to read book number 2, The Well of Ascension. So I'm hoping to have both The Final Empire and Well of Ascension done by the end of March. Okay, next thing I want to discuss with you is that I DNF'd a book this month. We will be getting to the stats very soon. I just want to get through this quickly. I DNF'd a book in the month of February, and that was this book. So I DNF'd it. Alright, now let's put the stats up on the screen for what I read in the month of February 2023 in 3, 2, 1, go. So, for the month of February, I read a total of 10 books comprising of 3 contemporaries, 2 cozy mysteries, 1 classic, 1 fantasy, 1 LGBTIQ+, 1 paranormal, and 1 romance. Your man, Mr. Francy, had a goal to mix up his reading with his genres, and boy did he do it this month. I read 7 different genres. Woohoo! Very, very, very proud of myself with that. Okay, to my age groups, I read 6 YA, 2 adult books, and 2 middle grades. To my lengths, I read 1 tome, 3 3/4 tomes, 4 half tomes, and 2 novellas, so quite varied there too, for a total page count of 3,350 pages. To my star ratings, I had 4 5 stars, 5 4 stars, and 1 3 star. So, now let's get into all the books that I read in the month of February. Okay, so the first book that I read for the month of February was this book, Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare. This is the second book in the Infernal Devices series. It is a YA fantasy, and it was one of the buddy reads that I was doing this month that I'm doing. Next month in March, I'm actually doing 4 buddy reads, and in April I'm doing 5. But this is one of the 3 that we were doing for February, and I gave this book a total of 4 stars. Okay, so not really a lot that I can tell you about this particular book because it is book 2 in a trilogy. We continue to, so yeah, I was going to say some things, but then anything I tell you is going to be a spoiler. So thoughts and feelings on this book. I enjoyed it. I found myself once again enamored with Will. I think he's such an interesting and complex character. His growth throughout the series has been a joy to live through. So I loved that. It's no longer a secret that Magnus Bane is featured in this series, and as a massive fan of Malik, this does so much for me. I delighted in each and every moment that we had with him. Something that was letting me down, however, is the evil of the story. So yeah, while trying to find this guy Mortmain, we are trying to stop these robot devices, and for a Shadowhunter world, this does not intrigue me even slightly, so that did let me down. But the characters are friends that I've grown to love while reading this particular series in the Shadowhunters universe. So there are things to do with the characters and character growth and stuff like that that I am absolutely loving, but the evil, quote-unquote evil of the world in this particular series, I'm just not a fan of. It's just not working for me, so there's that. But love Will, love Magnus, and I'm looking forward to closing out this series and reading book number 3. 4 stars. So the next book that I picked up was this book, Here's to Us, by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. This is a YA LGBTIQ plus book, and I gave this book, I believe it was 5. Yes, an overwhelming. So not just 5 stars, but an overwhelming 5 stars. So this book is the second book in the What If It's Us duology that Adam Silvera and Becky Albertalli wrote. I loved What If It's Us. In fact, allow me just a very quick sidebar here. When I originally purchased What If It's Us, I'd heard about a lot of controversy surrounding the book. This is book 1 in the duology. And so I had purchased it, but decided not to read it. Then about a year later, I purchased it again because I'd actually unhauled the original book that I bought. And I absolutely loved it and had no idea what they were referring to with the controversy because it was a really good book and I didn't in any way at all feel like it was controversial in the first place. So I loved it. One thing I didn't understand with the first book ending was the way it ended and why it ended that way. And then I found out that there was going to be a second book coming, so it made more sense to me. Finally, at least a year, if not longer, later, I picked up this book, book 2, Here's to Us, and I loved it. So the premise of the duology as a whole is that we follow 2 boys, Bendito and Arthur, who have a chance meeting at a post office in book 1. They've never met each other before, and they end up parting ways without exchanging any sort of information with each other. They both regret it and spend the rest of the first quarter to first third of the first book trying to find each other. Then they do. Then things ensue from there. And I just really had a great time with book 1. Yeah, book 2, absolutely loved it as well. Massive shout out to Adam Silvera. There's a lot that I could say about this, but if you haven't seen my weekly reading vlogs for the month of February, go back and watch my very first weekly reading vlog for the month of February and check out what I had to say over there, because I have so many praises to place onto Adam Silvera. I thought this book was just absolutely fantastic and I highly recommend the duology as a whole. And I've also managed to cross this duology off of my SAS list because it was on there and now I am done with that one. So 5 stars. The next book I read was this book, Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. This is a YA contemporary, and I gave this book 5 stars. This is one of my standalones that I read this month. I have a goal this year, as much as I'm reading a ton of series this year, my SAS list is bigger than it's ever been before. Thank you, Elizabeth from Lizzie Faye Loves Books. Lots of love for the SAS list. I also created a stand list of standalones. Feel free to go check that out if you haven't already. And this was one of the standalones that I had on my stand list. So I gave this book 5 stars. The premise of this book is that we follow Eliza, an unknown author / artist of the famous comic web series Monstrous Sea. However, Eliza loves and lives in this world so much that she doesn't have a care for or need of the world that goes on around her. One day she helps a new kid, Wallace, who is being bullied by other kids at the school. The pair form a friendship and Eliza may even be interested in more, but when she discovers that he is a huge fan of Monstrous Sea, how will she keep the fact that she is the creator a secret, and will it tear them apart if he finds out? So I really enjoyed this deep dive into introspection. I loved seeing Eliza living through the lives of her characters, but also loved Wallace serving as Eliza's peek into her physical reality. I truly enjoyed the book and would love to read more Zappia in the future. This is an amazing look into introspection and introversion. If you are or know of someone who is introverted and introspected, I highly recommend reading this book. Francesca Zappia did an amazing job. And yeah, would love to read more of her works in the future. 5 stars from me. So the next book I read was this book, To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. This is book number 1 in the To All the Boys I Loved Before trilogy. It is a YA romance and I gave this book 4 stars. So the basic premise of this book is that we follow Lara Jean, a girl who has written 5 boys she likes a letter that she never intended to send, but when they do get sent out unbeknown to her, Lara Jean's world is turned upside down. I honestly was considering DNFing this book at the beginning. Lara Jean just seemed too immature for me, and it just felt like the kind of book that wasn't for me. But I'm so glad that I gave it another chance though, as I really grew to appreciate it the more and more that I went along. I really loved the characters, I really enjoyed the plot, and I cannot wait to get into book 2 this month. This one was a tougher one for me to rate, and I think a better rating would be 3.75, but rounding it up, I'm giving it 4 stars. I honestly thought that it was going to be different to what it actually ended up being. I had heard a premise of this before, and whilst the premise wasn't incorrect, it gave me a different idea of what I was going to get out of this book compared to what I did get. But I do have to say, yeah, exactly as I was saying earlier, Lara Jean starts off a little too immature for me, and I was highly considering DNFing this book, and once again DNFing a series I'd already purchased after Furthermore, but I'm glad that it did improve over the course of time. I loved getting to know the culture of Lara Jean. I found that really interesting as well. And yeah, there's a lot going on with her and her family. But also, there was a fake dating trope that occurred in this book that I loved. I know not everyone's a fan of the fake dating trope, but when it's pulled off well, I love it. And I think that both Lara Jean and the guy she was in the fake dating relationship trope with had very good reasons to do what they were doing. And I felt like they pulled that off quite well to achieve the outcome they were setting out to achieve. But yeah, really enjoyed the book, and by the end, yeah, was really looking forward to the next one, and I am reading book 2 in March. But yeah, 4 stars from me. So the next book I read was this book, Tell Me 3 Things by Julie Buxbaum. I had been calling her Bobaum for a while and then found out I was saying it wrong. The X is not silent. So it's Julie Buxbaum. This book is marketed as a YA romance, but in my opinion, nay sir, that is an incorrect classification. This to me is a YA contemporary that contains a romance within the contemporary. I feel like it's a contemporary because we're exploring many different deep issues. So yeah, to me it feels more contemporary than romance. But anyway, so yeah, I truly loved this book, and I'm reading another Julie Buxbaum in March. What is it called? What to Say Next. And I'm looking forward to that one because this one blew my mind. So, to the premise. In this book, we follow Jessie, a teen who has lost her mother. Her father decided to remarry, and his new woman lives in LA. So he forces Jessie to pack up everything and leave behind everything and everyone, including her best friend Scar, and embrace all that LA has to offer. But what does LA have to offer? Snooty kids, a son that is always baking and way too bright, a stepbrother who wants nothing to do with her. No, this is all so wrong. But then an anonymous person sends her an email. They go to the same school as her and they see that she could do with some assistance. Can this person who is just named as somebody nobody be a truly amazing gift, or is this some weird rando? Only time will tell. Okay, so I'll get the negative out the way first. While I totally get why Julie Buxbaum did this, especially after listening to the author's note, I had an issue with just how much Jessie is in her head all the time, and I mean all the time. It does make sense, considering that I've read the author's note, and I cannot objectively say that it's wrong. It's just something that I would have preferred to have less of. To give an example, in the book, let's just say Jessie asks a guy if he's single. We then wait for paragraphs for the answer, all because we need to know everything Jessie is thinking before getting his response. This is a personal opinion, but I didn't like how much it happened. The inner thoughts of that distracted from the plot, in my opinion. But in saying that, I loved the whole anonymous person. I love the whole anonymous person trope in any case, and I loved it in this book. While tropes are something we see all the time, the difference between a trope and a cliche for me is that a trope can be done slightly differently, and it is still amazing. Julie Buxbaum pulled this off flawlessly. I was on the edge of my seat all the way through, trying to work out who SN, somebody nobody, was. I can honestly say I enjoyed everything about this book outside of my one con that I mentioned earlier. But the characters were great. The plot was fun. The study in grief was done well, and it was incredibly immersive for me. Yeah, so I was saying earlier that it's advertised as a YA romance, but I call it a YA contemporary. A big part of the reason why I'm calling it a YA contemporary is because it is a good look and study into grief and loss from the perspective of someone who is YA aged. And there are other issues that are explored in this book. And so whilst I'm not calling it a hard-hitting contemporary, I'd probably call it a medium-hitting contemporary, but I wouldn't call it a romance because to me, a romance is very clear to see that it's a romance. We have a man and a woman or a boy and a girl who are very quickly falling in love with each other, or they hate each other so much that we know they're going to love each other by the end of the book. That wasn't what this was. This was a contemporary that was dealing with hard-hitting issues that just so happened to have a romance at some point in the book. But I loved it. Julie Buxbaum is fast becoming an auto fave for me, and I can't wait to get into what to say next month. 5 stars from me. I highly recommend this book. If you love contemporaries, especially the exploration into grief and loss, I highly recommend this. It was fantastic. Okay, so the next book that I read was this book, Evermore, which is by Alison Noel. This is book number 1 in the Immortal series, and I do not remember why I picked this book up because this book was not originally on my TBR, but I remember that something happened. I needed to read another book, and so I decided to grab Evermore off my shelves because the Immortal series is on my SAS list, and I'd already read and therefore had book number 1. So I either replaced Furthermore with it or something. I honestly don't remember the reason. But anyway, this was technically a reread for me. For the premise, I'm going to read the blurb on the back because I could really go into spoilery detail here with this. So let's just see what the blurb here says. 16-year-old Eva Bloom is the sole survivor of a car accident that killed her family. Exiled to sunny California, Eva is haunted by her little sister and by the ability to see people's auras, hear their thoughts, and know their entire life story by touching them. She wants to hide from the world, but when a stunningly handsome new guy arrives at school, she can't seem to keep away. Falling in love with Damon is dangerous, but he's not what he seems. But if Damon is her destiny, how can Eva walk away? Yeah, so, okay, I get it. It sounds like Twilight, but it's not Twilight, at least not in book 1. Okay, yeah, so we are following this Eva girl who has these psychic abilities, but she doesn't want them. She wants them to get off her, and that's what intrigued me about this book the first time that I read it. Quick thoughts on other things for you. So Eva has 2 best friends who we see a lot of throughout the course of the book, and I love one of them to pieces, and the other one I have opposite thoughts of, and I just don't think that they're a really nice person. But anyway, so I love Riley, her male friend. I just think Riley was a great character. He offered up comedic value, but he also seems like a wonderful friend. But then we have Haven, who I'm just not a fan of. If you've read the book, you'll probably understand why. And if you haven't, then what can I say? Haven to me, and I could be proven wrong throughout the rest of the series, but I'm going to make a claim now and see. I'll check back when I've finished the entire series to see if I'm right. Haven to me seems like a friend of convenience. She is there. She is your friend when she wants to be, but when something else comes along, she drops you, goes and does that other thing, and then when the other thing is done, then she comes back and she's your friend again. And I don't like fair weather friends. That's just not my thing, and it annoys me when I see it in books, so I just wasn't a friend of Haven. But yeah, this guy, Damon, excuse me, he is the love interest in this book, but there is something interesting about him because whenever Damon is around, Eva cannot hear his thoughts or see his aura or anything like that. And so obviously there is a reason behind it. Yes, I get it. It sounds like Twilight even to me while I'm saying it, because Twilight being the reverse, that Edward can't hear anything when Bella is there. But anyway, it's not Twilight. And pick up the book because I liked it. I loved it the first time. I loved it the second time as well, both on original read and on reread. I gave it 5 stars, and I'll be reading book 2 finally for the first time. I'll read book 2 in May later on this year. 5 stars from me. The next book that I read was one of only 2 cozy mysteries that I read this month. So there you go, talking about mixing things up, unlike last year where I read 52 cozy mysteries. I only read 2 in the entirety of February. But the first one was this one, Decaffeinated Corpse by Cleo Coyle. This is book number 5 in the Coffee House Mystery series, and I gave this book 4 stars. So in this one, Claire and Mateo's old friend Rick comes to town, claiming to have created the best ever decaf. However, it seems someone wants to steal it from them, and Claire and Mateo jump right in to see what they can do to stop this mysterious antagonist from stealing Rick's creation or worse. So, okay. My thoughts on this book can be summed up in 1 sentence or less. The first 9/10 of this book I loved, and this book was gonna get 5 stars from me, and then the reveal happened, and the reveal was not good, okay? That's all I'm gonna say, okay? Okay, so I always love learning everything that Cleo Coyle, through Claire Cosey, our protagonist, can teach me about coffee, and learning about decaf this time was no exception. I also enjoyed the mystery aspects as I usually do. I had an idea in mind as to who I thought the killer was, but in the end I was wrong, and the reveal was a letdown. But because I was wrong, I've only ever been right once in all the cozies I've read, not because I was wrong, but because it just felt off or wrong as the reveal what was chosen, I needed to take off a star rating for that and gave it 4 stars. So yeah, the decaf exploration was fantastic. The reveal was such a bummer. Oh my gosh. It was just like, no, I did not like this. But so I gave this book 4 stars. Loved the first 9th, but didn't like the final 10th portion of the book at all. But if you thought that was bad, let's get on to the next book. So the next book I read was this book, which is French Pressed by Cleo Coyle, book number 6 in the Coffee House Mystery series. I need to say a little side note here before I go any further into discussing this book. I had planned in December of 2022, I had the plan to read books 3 and 4 of this series in January, and in February read books 5 and 6, and then that was all I was going to read for this year. That was the plan, and I'm going to stick to that plan. I had an issue with this book. I'm telling you what I'm telling you about my plan because I won't be reading any more Coffee House Mystery series this year, but it's not at all because of what disappointed me with this book. It was just that was my plan, and I'm sticking with my plan. I do absolutely plan to continue on with this series in 2024, if not in late 2023. Okay, so let's get into the premise of this one. Not happy with Joy's relationship with Monsieur Chef, Joy being the child of Mateo and Claire Cosey, our protagonist. So not happy with Joy's relationship with Monsieur Chef, Joy decides to get to their Claire decides to go to Joy's restaurant Solange. However, before she can even get there, Joy calls her to let her know that one of the kitchen staff have been murdered. Not too much later, another murder occurs, and Joy is at the top of the police suspect list. Can Claire save her daughter? Okay, so let's get onto the cozy side first and celebrate that once again. In the last book, we learnt about decaf coffee. It was so good. I love everything I learned about coffee in this series, and I would one day love to get a special edition of this series that just shows all the coffee tips we get in this series, because it is a gold mine for anyone who loves coffee. And in this one, we learn about pairings. So you know how you can pair wine with certain foods? Apparently you can pair coffee with certain dishes as well. Certain coffees and certain dishes pair together well. That was so fascinating. I loved it. The murders were interesting. The investigations were so intriguing. I had a bit of an idea who I thought. There were 2 murders that occurred in this book. With the second one, I had a rough idea of who I thought the killer was right away. Then the reveal happened. And Mr. Francy were not happy. Okay. Again, Not because I was wrong, but because the reveal could not have been any more disappointing. Okay, please can we put a spoiler tag up on the screen, because I have to say a very quick spoiler here. Okay, spoiler tag is on the screen. This is going to be quick, but I need to tell you why I was annoyed. Okay, spoiler tag's on the screen. We're going to do this right now. In this book, the killer is someone that we don't really know. We know of them, we know their name, we have seen them, but we do not speak to them at all until the reveal at the end. No! No! Cleo Coyle! No! Oh my goodness. We see this guy... Yeah, it's a spoiler, so I can say it. We see this guy here and there throughout the book, but we've never spoken to him before. Never. Actually, we see the guy maybe once or twice throughout the whole book, and that's it. And only because he's talking to someone else, and then this guy ends up being the killer. No! No, Cleo Coyle. Okay, take the spoiler tag away. Alright, if you weren't here for the spoiler, I ranted. I did not like the reveal. Alright, 4 stars from me, but I will definitely continue on with the series because I love the coffee stuff that is discussed. Thank you, Cleo Coyle, for that. No thank you, Cleo Coyle, for your past 2 reveals because they really did let me down. So the next book I read was this book, which I have been calling Amina's Voice by Henna Khan. And it is book 1 in the Amina's Voice duology. And then I found out I've been saying the name wrong, so I apologize. This book is correctly pronounced as Amina's Voice. And I am so sorry that I've been calling her Amina, because I've been hearing her name is Amina, but it's not. Her name is Amina. So... okay, Amina's Voice. Let's talk about the premise of this book. Let's talk about the stats. This is a middle grade contemporary book. It is book 1 in the Amina's Voice duology, and I gave this book 3 stars. In this book, we follow Amina, a middle grade student who is an Arabian Muslim. We explore Amina struggling to live in her own skin. If she had things her own way, she'd be singing every day for the masses. However, she is told that the Quran forbids singing. At the same time, her best friend Sujin is about to officially become an American citizen and is wanting to Americanize her name. How will Amina cope with the changes going on around her? Can she truly have it all? Or must she live life the way everyone else wants her to? Okay, so this book was very average for me in the first half. So Henna Khan brought up some amazing points about cultural and religious differences, but they are glossed over so quickly that I actually began to question if they were ever brought up at all. And it was just really annoying. I'm not saying that this happened all the time, because there were some issues that Henna Khan did delve into, took enough time to delve deeply enough into those issues, and I appreciate that. But there were certain issues that would come up, and they were more like random factoids. Like, it would come up as a sentence, and in the very next sentence, we had moved on. And that kinda annoyed me, I gotta say. But, look... the ending was done really well and had me upgrade my rating from a 2-star to a 3-star read, and I am going to be reading book 2, the final book in this duology, next month. I thought overall, look, the first half, I have to admit, it kind of bored me. It was a little bit slow, and honestly, I expected a heck of a lot more from this book. So, there you go. That's just me. I just wanted a whole lot more than I was being given. The second half was definitely a lot better. The ending was fantastic. I was going to give it 2 stars, but the ending bumped it up to a 3 because it was that good. And so I am looking forward to reading Amina's Voice in March and seeing what I think of Amina's Voice. But for, I'm reading Amina's Song in March, but for Amina's Voice, I gave it 3 stars. So the final book I read this month was this book, The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. This is book number 1 in the Chronicles of Narnia series. It is a middle grade classic, and I gave this book 4 stars. Okay, so some of y'all have been coming to me and saying, Mr. Francy, but this, Mr. Francy, but that, Mr. Francy, but this. So let me just put an end to all of the discussion that has been going on around me about my buddy read to do with the Chronicles of Narnia. Okay, for those of you who don't know, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe was the very first book, I believe anyway, that C.S. Lewis wrote. The Magician's Nephew was the second last book that C.S. Lewis wrote. However, C.S. Lewis wrote this book as the prequel to The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and I have a box set of these books, and this book says book number 1. So it is book 1 in timeline order, but not book 1 in publication order, and because it was book 1 in timeline order, that's why we're reading this one first for the buddy read, and then moving on to The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. That being said, the premise of this book is that in this prequel to all that occurred before The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, we follow the story of Diggory and Polly, who decide to explore an empty house. But the house is not empty. Diggory's uncle is there. At first, the children think he'll be cross with them, but he instead offers to give Polly a yellow ring. The moment Polly puts on the ring, she vanishes. Diggory's uncle explains that there are magical worlds out there, and that the yellow rings will take you to them, while the green ones will bring you back. He then sends Diggory on a journey to find Polly and bring her back. As to my thoughts, honestly, this one was very hard for me to rate. Not that it was a bad book by any means, but it just feels almost unrateable. I appreciate that it sets us up for the rest of the series, especially the ending. The ending was so good, and it made me so happy. That last sentence was so worth the read. I mean, the book was good anyway, but that last sentence, I was smiling from ear to ear. I appreciated the villain of the story a lot. I love the villain. But all in all, this book was a book to set us up for the series, and I felt it achieved its purpose. I do look forward to continuing on with the series, and ultimately I gave the, in my opinion, unrateable book 4 stars, because I do feel that that is what it truly earns. If I were thinking about it logically, it was a good book. I just felt I was sitting there after finishing it going, now what the heck do I rate this thing? I have no clue. So 4 stars seems right to me. I think that there were 1 or 2 issues that I had with the book in total, but otherwise it was a great book. So it deserves 4 stars. I look forward to now reading The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And now we imagine Mr. Francy picking up the whole pile of books and saying, now for everyone's favourite game that we like to call Up. These are the books that I read in February of 2023. What books did you read in February of 2023? Let me know in the comments below. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it. Link to my Discord is in the description if you'd like to join us for the buddy reads. They're all over there. They're easily spottable. If you can't find them, ask for help. We're happy to help you out. But in the meantime, please do be kind and love one another and spread your sparkling energy all throughout the world. And until next time, happy reading. Bye everyone.